The light shining off my head isn't blinding you?
Yes, and everything is being taped now, Jerry,
Okay.
including your shiny head.
You know, they say God made very few perfect heads. He covered all the rest of them up with hair.
Oh my God. So I'm facing the perfect head. That's what you're saying?
Must be, must be.
Okay. In any case, so now you look like you're in coffee shop, and I look like I'm in coffee shop. And we're talking. You're somewhere out east, and I'm next to Chicago in Skokie.
Right. I'm in Katona, New York.
Well, that's good. Where are you?
Katona. It's a town about 50 miles north of New York City.
What about your hometown? Why you're not there?
Well, this is where I live. Mount Kisco is where my synagogue is.
Oh, so you don't live right next to it, right?
No, 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 no.
You're a conservative Jew,
Right.
not an Orthodox.
No.
Okay, so that is probably one of the reasons that I want to talk to you about some things that you mentioned in your Dvar Torah.
Okay, great.
I mean, what piqued my interest was the fact that you made an emphasis on the Torah study as an important aspect of Jewish activity.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
Well, I think if I could just go back through my own life's experience a little bit, it could kind of give you a sense of how I got to where I am. As you mentioned, was brought up as a conservative Jew, was bar mitzvahed. But after that, I really didn't do very much. I was kind of your normal 3 times a year Jew, which is a very common situation. And I went to college, I got married, I had a house, I had kids, I had, a job, and I was very, very busy, and kind of the Jewish part of my life kind of fell to the back burner, other than the 3 days a year. And then after 40 years or so at work, I retired. And I remember waking up that first Monday morning and looking up at the ceiling and saying to myself, okay, now what? I had no idea what I was going to do with my time. I had lived a very structured life, going to work, taking care of business, taking care of my family. I always had a million things to do. Now I'm left to my own devices. And my wife, who knows me better than I know myself, had seen an article in the paper about an upcoming celebration for something called Daf Yomi. And what this is a program that started in the 1930s by a Polish rabbi who said, one thing we could do to kind of unite all Jews around the world is to have each study the same thing each day. And so his concept was everybody who was part of this program would study 1 page of Talmud a day. And everybody around the world would be studying the same page. And there's 2,711 pages in the Talmud. So this is a 7.5-year cycle. And what my wife had seen in the paper was that a cycle was about to end and a new one was going to begin, and they were having a big celebration in New York City at Madison Square Garden where thousands of people were going to gather. And she mentioned, I had taken a class in Talmud many years before and enjoyed it, but never really did anything with it because I was too busy. And so she said, why don't you look into this? Because I think my wife had an underlying motivation here. She said to me, I married you for better or for worse, but not for lunch. She didn't want me under her feet. And I think she thought this is a way to keep me busy. And so I looked into it, and it seemed like something I would be interested in doing. Now, I really didn't know very much, but I had a friend who I thought would be interested. And so I called him up. He said, yeah, I'll do it with you. And so we decided we're going to do this together because I thought if I did it on my own, I'd drop out. I'd never follow through. And he talked to his rabbi, and his rabbi said, you know what, I'll set up a study group. And so 6 or 7 of us studied together. And 7.5 years, each of us would read the page of Talmud on our own. And then once a week, we would get together and discuss that day's page with the rabbi. And he would answer questions that had come up during the week. And so I started at age 63, after a 50-year lapse, to study. And I loved it. I really enjoyed it.
Why?
And this led to,
Jerry, why did you love it?
I just liked the intellectual challenge. Talmud, I found, it resonated with me. It is very logical. You can't assert an idea without being able to prove it. And the rabbis engage in very complex debates and arguments to force the person who's asserting a point of view to defend his point of view. You just can't say it's so-and-so because I said so. That argument, which may work great as a 3-year-old, is not going to work with the sages of the Talmud. And so the process of Talmud I found just as compelling as the substance. The logic, the argument, the debates back and forth really appealed to me as sort of an ultimate expression of intellect. And the content also I found really compelling, the stories, the laws, and so on. And this led inevitably to more study in classes at my synagogue. I discovered Chabad, which I had never heard of before. Had taught classes. I started attending classes. And one day, a Chabad rabbi said to me, it's wonderful you're doing Daf Yomi, but that's not enough. You really need to expand your knowledge base beyond that. And he said, what you need to do is study Torah, and Torah with Rashi's commentary. Every week we read a parsha, a section of the Torah in the synagogue, but Rashi provides some incredible insight and extra knowledge about really what it's all about. And so he turned me on to something called Chayenu, which is this. It comes out every week. It's mailed to your mailbox. And it has a daily course of study. And includes Chumash with Rashi. So each day of the week, there's a section of that week's Torah portion with Rashi's commentary.
Why do you need that journal if Torah with commentaries, Rashi commentaries, is available online from Chabad's website?
You're right. There's lots of sources for this, but Chayenu has many other things which I found very interesting. So, for example, it has the Mishnah Torah, which is the Maimonides' compilation of the laws of the Torah and the Talmud in a very organized, structured way. And there is a cycle where you read one chapter a day. And over the course of 3 years, you go through the whole thing. And so I would read a chapter of Mishnah Torah every day. And there's also in there other things. There's ethics, there's stories, there's commentaries, and it's all organized day by day. So, and it comes right to your mailbox. And so it's very structured, and it encourages daily study, which is, I found, very helpful. My mindset, I worked for IBM for 40 years. And I used to make lists of things to do, and my life was very organized, very structured. And so I think psychologically, I found this very advantageous because it provides a very structured way for daily study, which is something that I really felt I wanted to engage in after doing nothing for 50 years. And so I would recommend this to people who are looking for a way in to do some daily study. And like you say, there's many sources of this. It's not just Chayenu, but it's very convenient because it's mailed to you each week. You get each book a week. There's also an iPad version. There's an iPhone. So you can get it electronically as well if you prefer that. But it's just very convenient. And for me at the
So
time,
basically, from what I understood, from what you said, the Torah study for you is a form of daily entertainment, right?
it's entertainment, but I would say it's also intellectual stimulation. It keeps your mind focused and functioning. Um, and I don't know, I call it entertainment. I enjoy it. It gives me pleasure. But I'm also carrying out an obligation of a Jew. We are obligated, to study. It's one of the fundamental mitzvahs in the Torah. And in fact, in the Talmud, it says that Torah study is equal to all of the other mitzvahs put together. There is a debate in the Talmud about what's more important, studying Torah or doing mitzvahs. And the rabbis decided studying Torah, because if you study Torah, you will naturally come to do the mitzvahs.
Let me play a little bit of devil's advocate.
Okay. I expected no less.
That's good. So you're not mistaken. It's not a disappointment for you. You started it at 63.
Right.
Meaning for most of your life, you lived as a Jew that did not care for these things.
Right. That's right.
At 63, only once you had your retirement pension, you started studying it.
Right.
Now, a lot of people are not in your position and they have to work.
Right.
So the question is, should they do it or should they wait till they retire?
Well, looking back, I wasted 50 years.
Oh my God.
That's the way I looked at it.
You wasted 50 years. Don't say it.
Absolutely. Because you don't have to spend 5 hours a day. Okay? There's ways to study that are, I guess I would call them low impact. Okay? Daf Yomi, I jumped into because I had the time. Talmud study takes time. But if you're working, I can understand it's going to be a major burden. And that's why I mentioned Chayenu, because you can bite off as much or as little as you want to. I would recommend some other alternatives if time is an issue. Here's one. This is a book by Joseph Telushkin, a very well-known, Jewish scholar. It's called Telushkin. It's called Jewish Literacy.
Is he Orthodox or conservative?
He's Orthodox.
Or Reform.
Okay. There's 350 chapters in this book.
Okay.
Each one's about a page or two. Read one a day. Take you 5 minutes.
When?
Anytime. I mean, I think anybody can find 5 minutes a day. I don't care who you are.
5 pages and 5
No,
minutes?
5 minutes. It's like 2 pages. Okay? A chapter is 1 or 2 pages a day. Okay? So I think anyone
What, you get up in the morning, you do what? And then you read?
Who, me?
No, not you, but somebody.
Anyone in general?
Yeah.
It's look, if you're commuting, do it on the train or the bus. Do it during your lunch hour. Okay? Do it, after dinner when you get home. I mean, I think anyone can find 5 minutes a day to study.
So it's an obligation.
I think under Jewish law, it's an obligation.
Are you telling me the Jewish law makes an obligation to read Telushkin?
No, it makes an obligation to study. Telushkin is just
to study what?
Study Torah. And Torah is a very broad expanse covering anything relating, this is now personal expression, anything related to Judaism. Okay, Telushkin's book is very convenient because it discusses ritual, holidays, laws, customs, tradition. It's very, very broad, and it's a very easy way, I think, for people to get started. There's a million websites out there that will send you something every day. There's a Chabad website, chabad.org, where you can go in and subscribe. And they will mail you each day an email with whatever you want. There's Torah, there's commentary, there's all kinds of different things that you can choose to subscribe to that'll wind up in your mailbox each morning.
Jerry, another question.
Yeah.
what you describe, this ritualistic form of study, normally in Yiddish called learning.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because it does not sound to me like academic, inquisitive, questioning study. That is questioning the fundamental principles and the fundamental ideas that you come across.
Okay, well, that's a great point. Okay, and I think there's two ways to read and to learn. One is to be passive, and which is just kind of let it all soak in, and the other is to do what you do, which is to really question as you do the reading, as you do the studying. Now, I think the challenge in doing that is to have somebody who you work with who can respond to those questions. I mean, if you're asking a question and you're the only one in the room, it's kind of falling on deaf ears because there's no one there to respond back. And so one of the traditions of Jewish study is to do it as a partner. And typically Talmud study and most Jewish study is done with another person for this very reason. There's an expression in the Talmud that two knives sharpen each other, and that when you should study with a partner because you will go through this process of questioning each other, and by doing so, you refine your knowledge and your understanding. And so that's why.
But even studying with a partner already makes it impossible to study Torah on a train.
Maybe not on a train, but of course, I should say I've heard of Daf Yomi study groups that do it on a train. Okay, right. The people I know in New York, Long Island Railroad, there are people who have set up a daily Daf Yomi study group on their 40-minute ride into Manhattan. 12 or 15 people study together. So, it's possible. Is this common? I can't answer that.
Do you do it that way?
Pardon me?
Do you do it that way?
No. I did it.
Or you have to have a particular dark outfit with dark hat and beard.
Well, these are not Hasidim. These were not Haredi Jews. These were conservative or Orthodox Jews. I'm not sure exactly the nature of their background.
They do study Talmud on a train?
But these are people who wanted to learn, and for the reason you said, they felt the most benefit would be doing it in a group where you can have this interaction. Now, I grant you, if you're living in a phone booth, it's very difficult. Most of us do have the ability to interact with other people. Now, there is a process which we're doing at our synagogue that is oriented this way. It's called Project Zug, Z-U-G. And it's based upon you studying with a partner. There's a website you go to, projectzug.org, where you can go there as an individual and they will assign you a partner, or you could say me and Joe, and Alex want to do this together. And the way it works is they've got 30 or 40 different classes. For each one, there's material on the website that you download, and it's maybe 1 or 2 pages of text with some questions that probe the material, and you with your partner read the material and then use these questions as a study guide. And you can do this any way you want. The two of you guys can meet together. You can do it via Skype, over the phone. You can meet somewhere whenever it's convenient. They leave up to you how and when you meet, but it's predicated on the point you brought up, that the best way to do this was someone else. And so they enable this through this website. And in our synagogue, what we did is there may be 30 people who engaged this last year. We had 15 teams, and each of us met on our own schedule as whatever was convenient. And then this was set up to end the week before Shavuos. Now, the tradition on Shavuos is you study all night. Our synagogue, we don't study all night. We study from like 10 to 12 or whatever it is at night. But what we did is the rabbi basically set up that each of these 15 groups would present that evening as the Shavua study an overview of the material that they had studied over the last 10 weeks. And so it became very, very good because each pair got up and talked about their own experience and what they had learned and the important lessons that came out of what they had studied. And it turned out to be really good, very good, because it was very interesting because if you had two groups that had picked the same particular course, it was clear that the two groups proceeded very differently, and what they took out of it was something very different. And it had to do with the fact that different personalities were involved who focused on different issues. And so this is, like I said, another way that's enabled to do what you said, which is to have this give and take. And Project Zug is a very low impact way to do this. It's very easy to set up. One friend of mine living here in New York, his study partner was located in Chicago, as a matter of fact. And they did it via Skype. And they would, whenever they meet, 8 or 9 o'clock, whatever it was, they would have their discussions back and forth. So once again, it's designed to give you some material to help you get started, but it accommodates, your own schedule, your own time availability, whatever works for you. And I think that's the important thing here, that each person has to approach this with what's convenient and comfortable for them. If you can set aside 5 minutes a day, you do one thing. If you got an hour, you can do something else. If you have very little background and exposure, then you do the Telushkin thing. If you have more knowledge, more experience, then you might take on something more challenging.
Now, can women study it too?
Of course.
But your guy at Chabad said that studying of Talmud is not enough. Now, within Jewish law, study of Talmud is available to women.
Those women do it. In fact, I had a class this morning with the rabbi on Talmud, and there were ladies there. Okay,
right, but not on Torah.
It was Talmud.
Not on the
meet on every Friday we meet and discuss the week's parsha. And there's it's actually there's 12 of us. There's 9 women and 3 guys. Okay.
Studying Chumash,
studying that weekly parsha. Now, to some degree, this is because Jewish women all outlive their husbands, so most of them are widows. Okay. That's that old story.
It's another good way of doing the mitzvah, right?
The story is, why is it that Jewish men die before their wives? And the answer is because they want to. Okay? So we have a lot of women who go to Chabad and study Torah with, and there's, like I said, there's 3/4 women and 1/4 men. In my synagogue, I'd say when we have these classes, it's 50-50. But the gender is for study in terms of Orthodox is different than the gender for ritual, because you're right. When in an Orthodox synagogue during ritual services, there is a separation of men from women, but in terms of studying, not so.
But in Jewish tradition also, the study of Torah itself, that is 5 books of Moses, is actually prohibited for women.
I don't think I've ever seen that. I think that may be more tradition than law. Okay? Because I can tell you, Chabad, which is very scrupulous about observance of halacha, women are involved in everything. And so, and I will tell you something, there's not a Chabad house on this planet where the wife of the rabbi, the Rebbitzin, doesn't run the whole thing. Okay, so I think there's, there's a lot of funny observances that are, traditions that are not really the law. So,
when you study, how many hours a day do you study? How much do you study?
I would say, well, I can tell you what I do. I get up in the morning. I read a chapter of Tanya, which is the philosophy written by the Alter Rebbe, who was the founder of Chabad Hasidus. And Tanya is Chabad philosophy. And I read a chapter a day. It is an amazing book. It's written in the 18th century. It lays out the philosophy of Chabad. And it's very interesting. The underlying logic here is that everyone has within him two souls: a godly soul, which wants to get close to God and do mitzvahs, do good deeds, and what's called the animal soul, which really cares about itself. It wants to eat. It wants to, take care of the family. It wants to do the earthly things. And it's not bad. It's just self-absorbed. These two souls exist within a body, and they compete with one another for control of the body, because you can't do good deeds without the body. All mitzvahs are inherently physical. And so the average person has this struggle going on inside between the godly soul and the animal soul. And what Tanya talks about is how you deal with this. How do you reconcile these two competing aspects of the human psyche? And it's very interesting because it talks about the fact that at times you can become depressed because you may want to do all these good things, but you're being dragged down by your animal soul to eat or to do this or to do that. And so there's stuff about how to deal with depression, as an example. It's a very interesting book. And there's a lot of psychology in here that was done 100 years before Freud. And so it's got a lot of interesting aspects. So I'll read a chapter of that in the morning. I then will do my Daf Yomi, which takes one page takes me about an hour. Then I'll do Chayenu, and I'll do Chumash with Rashi. I'll do the chapter of Mishnah.
How do you do Daf Yomi?
I basically, I'm on my second, I read it. And very often, Talmud, as I'm sure you know, there's many references in there because, as I said earlier, you cannot assert an argument without proof. And so proof often tends to be pointing to some verse in Scripture or a Mishnah or a Midrash or something else. So I will very often go and look up those sources. And so I'll go look, if they point to some Midrash, I'll go try and find it. And so I often go off into the weeds, and what could take me 45 minutes if I read it straight through will take me 2 hours because I'm looking up all this extra stuff. And so my Talmud varies from, I'd say, 45 minutes to an hour or two, depending upon, how scrupulous I want to be in chasing down some of these resources. Now, I got to tell you, I'm on my second Daf Yomi cycle. So I can do this faster than the first time when I didn't know anything. Okay? You got to understand, the first time through, I knew Gurnished. Okay? I knew zip. And so I had to look up everything. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of what's exciting and interesting in the Talmud is the process, the debates between the rabbis. And there are certain patterns of discourse that you have to understand how they work. I didn't know any of that. And so I had to learn how the process works, which is intriguing, and really fascinating. And now, second time through, I'm much more familiar with this, so I can move along at a much more rapid pace. So I'll do my Talmud, and I'll do my Chumash with Rashi, and my Mishnah Torah. And then I have also another synagogue. They have a daily reading, and we've been reading this. This is called the Book of Days, written by Jill Hammer. It looks like this. There's one page per day, okay? And it takes like 3 minutes. And so for each page, there's a little tiny piece from the Tanakh, there's a piece from Midrash, and then there's some commentary. It takes 5 minutes.
But this is something that you would do on your own, right?
Yes, yeah. And I'm doing this as part of a reading program at the synagogue. Now, I'll tell you, we're almost done because we're near the end of the year. This is a little touchy-feely for me. Okay, now it's a little more New Age kind of stuff, where we are one with the earth, this kind of stuff. But it's another dimension. And so here again, this is something very simple that anyone can do in 5 minutes. Another thing I do, as with Chumash with Rashi, the daily Parsha study, this is from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's called Daily Wisdom by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And here again, it's on each day, the Parsha section you read for that day, it's like 3 minutes on the Rebbe's perspective or commentary on that day's Parsha reading. And so I've gotten to the point now where I've been reading Rashi now for 10 years. So a lot of it I'm comfortable with. And so I started looking for other things to complement the Rashi. And so these are all things I find very interesting to read. And it's another 15 minutes. So altogether, it's a couple of hours a day that I spend doing this.
Jerry, this is a very, very interesting time that I spent with you. Would like to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
What kind of benefits do you expect as a result of hours and hours of going through pages of these books?
Well, I think I understand Judaism now a lot better than I did before. One of the problems I had is, as I mentioned, I quit my learning at age 13. I went through life with a 13-year-old's view of Judaism. And 13-year-olds don't know anything about anything. And so I had a juvenile's perspective on Judaism. One of the things Telushkin said is that for people like me who end their study at age 13, they believe that Judaism is for children because that's the perspective they have. And as I've gotten older and I've now started reading, I realize the depths of knowledge that are here are remarkable. One of the things that's interesting, if you look at a page of Talmud, it has many sections. The Talmud page is broken up into different sections. And you have one section is the Mishnah, which was written around the year 200, and is a commentary on something in the Torah, which was codified, let's say, 500 or 600 years earlier, let's say 500 BCE. So you're commenting on something from 500 BCE with the Mishnah from the year 200. And then you have the Gemara, which is the commentary on the Mishnah, which is around the year 500. And then you have Rashi's commentary, which is around the year 1100. And Tosafot, which are his sons-in-law and grandchildren, which is around the year 1200. So on one page, you've got like 2,000 years of Jewish thought. And it's like peeling an onion. And it is a remarkable insight into the evolution of thinking. And you see...
You do it in Hebrew and Aramaic?
I read the English. My Hebrew is mediocre, and my Aramaic is less. And so I rely mostly on translations, which is a problem. And I'm thinking that this year, with Rosh Hashanah coming up, I may commit to try to learn Hebrew in the next year, biblical Hebrew, because I am tired. One of the things you necessarily have to deal with is when you read translations, you're getting the translator's view of the original. I want to have my own view. And so I'm thinking about this, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this, and I'm still working on that. But to get back to the point, you see the evolution of thought over time. And as I mentioned, I've gone through a similar kind of evolution of thought. As I've learned more, my perspective has gotten different and deeper. You know, they say that there's 4 levels of Torah study, which are encapsulated in the acronym Pardes, which means a garden. Each letter is represents a Hebrew word. The Peh is for Peshat, which is the literal, obvious meaning. And that's the level at which Rashi does his commentary. Rashi said he wrote his commentary for a 9-year-old. And he deals it primarily at the surface level. The Resh is Remez, which means hinted, which would be the next level. And so what's hinted in the text? Something below the surface. And the example here would be gematria. Gematria is like Jewish numerology. Each letter of the alphabet has a number value assigned with it. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, and so on. And you add up the numeric value of a word, and that total has some significance. So, for example, we're obligated to wear tzitzis, fringes on our garments to remind us of the commandments. The gematria of the word tzitzis is, you add up the letters, it's 600. On a tallis, there's 8 strands and 5 knots. 600 plus 8 plus 5 is 613, which is the number of commandments. So this is an example of gematria, and there's a lot of this in the Torah. So that's the second level. The Dalet is Darash, which is the Midrashic, the homiletic level. Midrash is a universe of explanations about the Torah and the meanings of the Torah. And so there's a million Midrashic insights. The last is Sod, which means hidden, which deals with the Kabbalistic interpretations of the Torah. And, Kabbalah is very complicated, very deep, very difficult in many areas. After studying it for 15 years, all I know is how little I know. But the point is there's many levels at which you can study Torah. And that's why I found it's always interesting and always new, because there's so many levels there at which you can approach it. And the challenge, I think, for me as an individual and anybody else, is to try to find new avenues, new doors to open as you do these studies. And the exciting thing here is there's so much help available in terms of books and websites and study groups that it's easy. If you want to do it, there's a million ways to go about it, because there's lots of venues out there to help you do this. You don't have to do this on your own. Okay, there's a million.
And the last question.
Sure.
Now, some people think that the best way of learning is by teaching.
Right.
Do you teach?
Yeah, I do. And I've taught classes at my synagogue. I'm teaching a class in Talmud now. And I got to tell you, I love it. Okay. And because the questions you get force you to think a lot more deeply and to come back with an answer that makes some sense. Okay. And so I love teaching. You are forced to really understand the material. You can't just wing it, because there's always some wiseacre who's going to ask you an oddball question, and you gotta be able to come back with something coherent. Now that wiseacre used to be me, okay, and so I really enjoy it very much. I've taught classes I mentioned Talmud, in Pirkei Avot, in Tanya, in the Chabad philosophy. So I've taught a number of classes. It's a lot of fun for me. And I think I'm doing a mitzvah, because I'm helping other people to get past that hump that is so difficult, which is how do I get started? And I think that's the difficult thing, is to just make the commitment and say, you know what, I'm going to do it. And take a small bite at first. One of the problems I think that a lot of people encounter is they try to do too much too quickly. I think trying to jump into Daf Yomi with zero background on your own is very, very difficult. Talmud study it requires help to get started.
So what would you start with?
I'd say I would start with Chayenu, okay, which is very easy to get into, or the Telushkin book, something that you can do in reasonable bites. Now, I know you're thinking of starting something in your community. It's always easier if you can do it with other people as opposed to on your own. One of the good things our synagogue does is we have lots of adult education programs for this very reason. And we bring in outside people. In some cases, it's synagogue members like myself and others who are involved, because it's a lot easier to do it with other folks, because they'll keep you in line and they'll keep you interested. And also, it's better if you have somebody going with you to keep you engaged. If you're on your own, it's easy to drop out. If you're going with somebody else, there's some psychological pressure to keep going because you don't want to look bad and you don't want to be the one who quits. And so it's a lot easier, I think, to do with someone else. And that's why study groups or Zug partners, Chavruta, any of these things where you do it with someone else is really a very easy way to get into it. And organize it yourself or use Project Zug or any of these other things that are available. There's lots of websites that can help. Like I said, if you want to do it on your own, I would recommend Telushkin's book or Chayenu. Chayenu is CHAYENU.org. They have, if you want, go there. They have a 3-month free trial subscription. You want to give it a shot, you can do it for 3 months for free. As I said, there's a million kinds of things out there on the internet to get you started.
Jerry, it's been wonderful spending this time with you. I've learned a lot, and hopefully it's going to be of benefit to some of the members in our Chicago Jewish Cafe.
Well, it's my pleasure. I would say one other thing.
Please.
I mentioned that it's helpful when you're studying to have access to resources. JDL is terrific.
What do you mean by that? What is JDL?
Jewish Digital Library, Judaic Digital Library, is a terrific resource. Our synagogue subscribes to it. And
now, Jerry, I did not pay you for this endorsement.
Did not pay, but I will tell you, it's a wonderful resource. I have, over the last 15 years, bought a lot of books. And my wife has no problem with the books, except there's no place to put them anymore. This she has a problem with. JDL has all of the key traditional Judaic resources are out there and accessible. And so, as I said, it's a great place to go to get access to lots of Judaica in a very convenient way.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. I did not ask you for this endorsement, but I really appreciate you giving it of your free will. Although, please have the other guy remove the gun that we put next to you.
Now, please let my grandchildren free.
Jerry, sei gesund.
Sei gesund. Have a wonderful New Year.
Thank you, and you too, you and your family. Bye.
Bye-bye.